Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be summing things up with the GTR series, going over my final thoughts, and then I'm also going to go over the things that I think you should know about the GTR before you end up purchasing it. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, so let's get into the video. Now we'll start with like less serious points, then we'll get into the more serious points. So first, less serious point is understand that if you get one of these, you are going to get a massive amount of attention, way more attention than I realized. I thought, okay, it's just a GTR, so people aren't going to freak out about it. Everywhere I go with this car, someone comes up to me and talks to me about the car and talks about how they love it so much and how they've always wanted one, and I don't know, it's an awesome experience. And I mean, I have a bright neon green TRX and it doesn't get nearly as much attention as this GTR. Like, it is, again, it's crazy, and maybe it's the bright blue color that kind of lends to that, but yeah, just understand it gets a ton of attention. Now, something that I guess is not really too serious, but a little bit more on the serious side, is understand that, especially if you live in an area like me that has lots of trees, then lots of debris is going to get stuck up here, so you kind of have to occasionally pull it out. But I mean, again, no big deal. Now, something that's a little bit more serious, I guess, is with the lights. These headlights are extremely bright, which is great for visibility, but for other people, not so much. And there's totally a bug crawling. Bye-bye. Anyways, for other people, not so great, because you're constantly gonna have people flash their brights at you because they think your brights are on, but it's just because these lights are really bright. But I mean, that's like a benefit. Now, the other thing is, this front end eats rocks like there is no tomorrow. So if you get a GTR, definitely do paint protection film, especially this center portion right here. I'm totally getting eaten alive by bugs. This center portion right here, just tons of little rock chips and everything. And so, yeah, I'd recommend paint protection film just to protect the car. Now, the next thing is, the GTR doesn't look too low to the ground. Like you guys can see here from the front, it doesn't look too low to the ground, but I felt like underneath the front splitter, like, I don't know if I can show this too well on camera, but you guys can kind of see, like, it just feels like sandpaper because it has been scraped so many times. Now, part of that is the people that drove this before me, right? I don't know what situations they drove it in, but obviously they scraped it quite a bit. So you do want to be careful with the car, definitely angle it. And I mean, that's most high performance cars, but it's like deceivingly low. It doesn't look like it's that low, but it actually is pretty low. So you have to angle this car way more than what you would normally think with most cars. So one thing to note is you just get a regular key fob with the GTR. You don't get anything special. I mean, it does say GTR at the top, but it's just a regular Nissan key fob. And then I want to open up the trunk so you guys can see here. So storage space with the GTR is absolutely fantastic. You guys can see that once you get into the trunk, tons of storage space. I mean, you could fit tons of like luggage back here if you wanted to, basically, which is absolutely awesome. The opening itself isn't massive. It's about the same size as like a Mustang or a Camaro. A little bit bigger maybe, but I mean, yeah, once you get in, like I said, it's massive. And I mean, it's crazy because, again, this is a supercar killer, but then at the same time, it's extremely practical from a storage space perspective. I love these door handles so much. They're so cool. And then the fact that obviously it makes it a little bit more aerodynamic is also cool. Now, I want to continue on the side of storage space. So the GTR does have back seats, but again, they aren't large. And so, yeah, you can fit kids back here. But the reason that these are so cool is, again, this is like extra storage. So think about this. You have a bunch of luggage in the trunk, and you could have a bunch of luggage in the back seats, and the fact that it has back seats is awesome. Again, considering the performance and all that, I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, from a storage space perspective, the GTR is pretty crazy. Now, the next thing is, if you get a 2017 or newer, they revised some stuff with the GTR from the interior perspective, and also with the suspension. So the suspension's actually smoother. So if you want kind of like smoother suspension, again, I'd recommend 17 or newer. And then also if you want the nicer interior, 17 or newer. They've added a bunch of this really nice leather all throughout the interior, and you guys can see it's on the dash, all that kind of stuff. And so these newer GTRs definitely have a nice luxury car interior, and then the seats are really cool. Yes, you could do a racing harness on them, which I think that's another cool little facet of it. Now, something I've noticed that a lot of people get confused on is the seat adjustment. So this actually does the backrest. So you guys will notice that twist motion, and then forwards and backwards. So it's like all in one. And then it doesn't have cooled seats, just heated seats. The controls there on the side. That's another thing that confuses people. And then here is the adjustment for the front, all that kind of stuff. So that's another thing that, again, I noticed that people don't really notice with the car. Something else I've noticed is the first startup of the day sometimes will take a little bit longer. Now, I've already started up, so this one should be pretty quick. You guys can see it does take a second to turn over. Now, I've noticed that once I've been driving it all day, it definitely starts up a lot quicker, but when it's been sitting overnight and I initially started up, and that's just like driving it last night and then starting up in the morning, it does take a second to turn over, but I mean, that's not really a big deal. I thought I'd just mention it because I'm talking about everything with this car. But let's close this up so we can talk about more stuff with the interior. So first off, some stuff that is pretty cool that you guys kind of already saw in my review is this has normal practical car stuff, like it has all the controls on the steering wheel and all that. And then with the newer GTRs, they actually mount the paddles on the steering wheel. They used to be on the column for the 2016s and older, and now they're on the steering wheel. And so if you want the column mounted paddle shifters, you got to get an older one. If you want the steering wheel mounted paddle shifters, you get a newer one. That was something that I thought was pretty interesting in terms of the differentiation. And then as for the gauge cluster, it's pretty old school. It doesn't show a lot of information. Something that I have noted is you've got this button right over here that goes through different screens. It actually is pretty practical from a sense that you can see stuff like fuel economy, which, yeah, my fuel economy is not great, but that's because I've been enjoying the car, okay? Aside from that, like you can see, it shows basic information with the car, but I just like how it's pretty easy to use. And so if you just want to see quick basic info, it's just right there in that little center portion. In terms of the fuel economy, so if you aren't doing launch control all the time like I've been doing, and I do want to talk about that in just a second, then you actually can get pretty good fuel economy. So my friend Brad that lives up in Ogden that has the Instagram page of Rival GTR, which the reason I'm mentioning up to Ogden is because I did take a road trip with this car up to him, and I actually got pretty good fuel economy. I was averaging in the 20s on the highway, but his car, he's averaging over 20 miles per gallon when he drives it a little bit more reasonably as well. And so you actually can get pretty good fuel economy if you aren't doing launch control all the time and, well, rallying it like I have been. But it's fun. Now, something to note, if you do plan on getting a GTR, is understand the infotainment system's pretty dated. Now, the camera is actually not too bad. Like, the resolution is actually pretty decent. I haven't had any complaints with that, and it's got parking sensors front and rear, but it doesn't have any 360 camera or anything like that. And then in terms of the infotainment system itself, it's pretty decent. It does take a second sometimes for stuff to respond, but the response time isn't too bad. It just doesn't look super modern, but I haven't really found myself using it all that much. I basically just connected my phone to Bluetooth, listen to music, and then I just have this gauge up because it's cool to see the boost PSI and everything. But yeah, just understand older infotainment system. It does come with dual zone climate. Something I've noticed that's kind of weird though with the GTR is the air conditioning works great, but sometimes it'll randomly blow like a couple puffs of hot air and then it'll go back to being cool. I've just noticed that happens kind of randomly. And then in terms of the drive mode select, here's what I've preferred to do. So I've preferred to do this one over in the R mode, and then with the traction as well, and then with suspension over in comfort for most of my driving. Now, to do launch control, you have to have everything in the R mode, and then this will allow you to do the launch control. I've tried to do it without all of them in R mode, and it doesn't, like, the RPMs don't build up, it won't launch basically. But yeah, just for around town driving, this is what I've been doing. And then speaking of around town driving, I have mostly been driving this in manual mode. The automatic mode does a pretty good job, but I definitely prefer the manual mode because what I've noticed with the automatic mode is it seems like it's trying to save on gas quite a bit because, especially on the highway, I would floor it and it wouldn't downshift all the way down to like the lowest possible gear so I could get tons of power. It would only downshift like one gear. And like this has tons of power, so I'd still be able to pass people, but it's like, no, I want to pass them at a much faster rate than what this is doing. And so I've mostly been driving it in manual mode, and that's what I kind of recommend. Drive it in manual mode, and if you are going to drive it in manual mode, drive it like you drive a manual transmission car. And what I mean by that is don't go in first gear. Like, first gear is pretty clunky in this car, and what I've been doing is I just let the car go into first gear itself. And let me know if I'm doing this wrong. Like, if you own a GTR and I'm doing this wrong, then let me know. What I've been doing basically is I get up and moving, right, and I upshift and all that kind of stuff. But when I'm coming to a stop and downshift, I'll downshift all the way down to second, but then I don't go into first. I just let the car fully stop, and then it automatically throws it into first even if you're in the manual mode. And I've noticed that that gives you kind of like the smoothest driving experience, and it doesn't go crazy clunky or jerk or anything like that. And yes, everyone knows the transmission on this isn't necessarily the smoothest. It's not bad. Just understand first gear is kind of a little bit clunky, but once you're past first gear and you're up and moving, the gear shifts are just instantaneous, super smooth. And yeah, that's, again, I would just recommend drive it like a manual transmission. So like, think about it. If you're coming up to and you're slowing down, you're not going to like shift into first, right? What you do is you downshift to second, and then you just usually go into neutral or something like that, right? You don't go all the way into first until you're, you know, ready to go up and moving again. I want to quickly talk about the sound system and then also the reliability. So first off, it's got the Bose sound system. It's a pretty good sound system. Sound quality is pretty good. The bass is pretty good as well. The one thing I will say is some of you, especially if you're like music fans, you probably will want to upgrade the sound system. I've seen a lot of people do that with GTRs as they upgrade the sound system. Again, the factory unit is pretty good. Not necessarily the best, but I mean, it gets the job done. I personally don't have any complaints with it. Now, reliability. I normally don't ever talk about this because most of the cars I review are brand new. They don't have any miles on them. And so it's like, I don't have any right to talk about reliability because I'm not driving a car that's used enough for me to really get a scope on reliability. However, this is a press car, obviously, and it's got about 8,700 miles on it. When I return it, I'll probably be at about 9,000 miles roughly because I have a 500 mile limit per car. And here's what I have to say. First off, again, with these press cars, they are just beat up like none other. Obviously, people are doing exactly what I'm doing. They're constantly launching the car. They're just really driving it and using it and pushing it to its limits, obviously, to get a full kind of like picture of what the car is like. And so like, this is not your typical GTR, right? I feel like the typical GTR owner is going to have some fun with it, but they're going to be a little bit more reasonable with the driving. They're not going to beat it up and abuse it nearly as much as what this car has experienced. And the thing that's crazy to me is not only is everything in this car really nice still interior wise, like the interior is held up so well over a bunch of people being in and out of this car, but on top of that, I haven't had any reliability issues. And over the period of me having this car, it has been 100 degrees every single day. And I've used launch control probably, I feel like a safe bet is probably about 10 times per, I'm being completely honest with you. Like it's tons of fun. I've used it about 10 times per day. Okay, so it's been 100 plus degrees. I've constantly been launching the car. Like I am like just banging through the gears all the time, going up to red line. Like I am seriously driving this car like crazy. And there's a reason why. It came with a full tank of gas. I already went through that full tank. This is my second tank and I'm already out again. Like I'm literally only getting just over 100 miles of range with the GTR because of how hard I've been driving it. So like, I hope that gives you an idea of how much I've been like using the car and the fact that it has held up so well over all the other people that have used it. And then on top of it, me like really pushing this car is just completely impressed me, and it goes to show just how well built the GTR is. Now let's kind of summarize things with the GTR. So like I said, it gets tons of attention, especially in this blue color. People just absolutely love it. Now I know I didn't talk a ton about the performance with the car. I feel like that's a given. Everyone knows that the GTR has crazy performance from the straight line to around corners, all that kind of stuff. Like it's just a given with the car. Now aside from all of that, like I said, extremely practical. It has tons of storage space, and then again, it's got the all-wheel drive. So here in Utah, I hypothetically could drive this in the winter time, which is pretty cool. And then like I said, I have just been absolutely beating the crap out of the car, launch control all the time, just absolutely rallying it, and it has performed flawlessly. Nothing has broken on the car. It's doing just fantastic, and so reliability on it seems to be really strong as well. And so here's what the GTR really looks like, is you get supercar attention from people, you have supercar performance, but then you have normal car practicality from the all-wheel drive to the storage space, and then also with the reliability. And the maintenancing on this is really not that bad. I've looked it up. It's actually not expensive to maintain these, as long as you don't modify them, right? Once you modify them, then, I mean, any car, when you get into the modifications, then things start to get a little bit expensive. But if you keep the car stock, it's actually relatively inexpensive to maintain. And so you have this car that gives you all the stuff that a supercar gives you, and it's significantly less expensive than most other supercars, but then it's way more practical, way more daily drivable. And yeah, I am so impressed. Again, like I said at the beginning of this video series, I am not a GTR person. I have never been a GTR person, but leaving this whole like series and having some time with this car, it has completely changed my perspective on this. And to be completely honest, this is now on my shopping list. I think that says it all.